Buckle up. It's time for the Champions of Cinema podcast.
Welcome, sports fans, to the Ultimate Cinematic Arena. I'm your host, Joe Walker, and this is the Champions of Cinema podcast. Fellow producer James Marshall and I are taking a deep dive into the heart-pounding world of sports films, the victories, the defeats, the unforgettable moments that make us cheer, cry, and believe in the power of the underdog. It's Season 3, Episode 6, and today it's time to take you back, take you back to the gritty streets of Philadelphia for a rebuilt sequel in the life of the eponymous character, Rocky Balboa.
Eponymous?
Yeah, eponymous. It means
I've never heard
the
that word.
title, the name, the person who the thing is named after.
Good, I like that.
Do you see? I can write an intro.
Hit that. Impressive. All right.
And I think, James, we'll get straight into some reasons why people should watch Rocky Balboa.
Absolutely, because in this film is a lot, I'd say, is a lot more about Rocky's personal life. Definitely, Rocky's not just fighting in the ring, he's fighting against time, personal loss, meaning of life. Moving is way more than just a boxing film, really.
It's also one of those most emotional Rocky movies
completely,
ever.
Absolutely.
You know, you feel his struggle, what it's like, you know, to be in those problems. It just makes it so powerful.
And for being real, like, he's still an underdog, and that's they've done a really good job here. It's like, well, this iconic character, you know, is like, it's the 6th film now, but they still managed to make him an underdog. It's like, which I thought was they did a really good job. And it's like, Rocky, he may be older, but he's still got something to prove, and this movie really shows that.
Exactly. You know, and of course, we've got that speech. It's not about how hard you can hit, it's about how hard you can get hit. Keep moving forwards.
Keep moving forward.
I mean, that might be one of the most motivational moments in movie history.
100%. And maybe it might be the most clipped Rocky moment of all time. Potentially, to like turn on YouTube, like, inspirational movie moments. I think that always comes up, you know, with, you know,
100%.
some in motivational music, you know, chills every time, you know. And what I love is that this movie really brings back Rocky. It brings Rocky back to its roots. You know, it's no more USA versus Russia Cold War showdowns, and they've ditched the glam and the exotic suits and the robot butlers, like all the things that Rocky was like trying to be. He was kind of like faking it a bit because he felt like this is what a boxer should be. But now it's like, you know, there's none of that. It's just him. You know, it's just him, and he's back to where he was. This took place in 2006, and it's gone back to 1976. You know, it's
absolutely. It's 30 years later.
Storytelling,
but it is that original Rocky feeling again.
Yes.
One man against the odds, fighting for something bigger than a title.
Yeah,
you know, wanting to sort of reach into himself and find the strength of what has made him the person that he's been throughout his life.
And whilst we ultimately see Rocky again in the Creed films, you know, this was meant to be Rocky's farewell. I think that it did a really good job of that. This could I would have been happy if this was the last time we saw Rocky. Luckily or not luckily, we see him again because, you know, like we've seen, you know, the Rocky recipe was so good that I thought, okay, well, maybe if we're not having a Rocky film anymore, let's explore a new character within the Rocky universe that Rocky is still attached to, which of course was Adonis Creed, yeah. Apollo's son. So
yeah.
But this is a fairly good ending, and a perfect ending, really, to be honest. I thought this was great.
We're going to really get into this one. We're going to break down what makes Rocky Balboa so fantastic. Before we do that, just a quick check-in with you. As my favourite co-host. What have you been watching recently, James?
I've been watching a lot. I've been a bit poorly last couple of days. So I've just been sort of rotting on my sofa, watching YouTube, doing my painting and stuff. But obviously we had because we had the Super Bowl last Sunday. So we're currently recording this on the 15th of February, 6 days after the Super Bowl. I think most of my time has sort of been reflecting on that game, watching
TikToks of Kevin Drake Lamar.
Yeah, talking about like, is this the end of the Chiefs dynasty? All the overreactions that we tend to get after the biggest game of the year. So, but yeah, what about you?
I have finished Mad Men again.
Oh, cool.
Really enjoyed getting through that. I've watched a couple of little things here and there. I've been just trying to watch some kind of different movies, some stuff that I haven't seen before, trying to reach into, which is not easy for me because I've seen a lot of movies over the course of my life. But yeah, just trying to broaden a little bit, watch some different kind of stuff. Getting excited about some stuff that's going to be coming out in the cinema in the next few months.
Yeah. That Zeppelin film I'm eyeing on at the moment. I rewatched that Led Zeppelin
the docu-film that's coming out. That should be really good
when that comes out, yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, just trying to hope for this winter to sort of start wrapping itself up and the warm weather to come back and the enjoyment.
I've enjoyed
go outside.
I've been enjoying leaving work this week and it's actually light outside. That's been really refreshing. And in fact, yesterday it was really light. I was like, oh my God, it's almost the middle of the day. It's great, you know.
Before you know it, you'll be heading home and you'll be thinking, let's just go to a pub garden.
Oh.
as a working man in my evening after work and start looking at girls in sundresses walking past. Oh, great. Let's talk about Rocky Balboa, James, from 2006. This, I think, really, in some ways, is the movie that Sylvester Stallone wanted Rocky V to be. It's exploring a load of themes that we haven't really seen before in the Rocky movies. We've lost main characters. We're seeing the end of more characters that are going to be very, very much the sort of end of the product. I think this was maybe Stallone saying goodbye to the character initially. Now, we have got Stallone playing Rocky twice more in some spin-offs that are going to take up the next 3 episodes for us in the Champions of Cinema podcast. But we're going to really sort of have to look at this through the eyes of what Stallone was trying to achieve, and that is ending the Rocky story in the nicest way possible. A few little stats for you before we get into your haiku. This was budgeted for $24 million, which was almost half the price of Rocky V. It made $156 million, which is much more than Rocky V. IMDb rating of 7.1, which I think is, happily average, and a Rotten Tomatoes of 78%, which is again happily average and worthwhile. This one's got some specialness to it. It's got some life to it. It's got some enjoyable elements that make you feel maybe like Stallone was able to craft something into a piece of potentially art.
Yeah, because I feel like Rocky V ended quite abruptly. You know, you had that little, you had the little encounter with Tommy Gunn, which was like whatever, and it just sort of opened. It felt like there could have been a Rocky VI because there wasn't really an ending. But at the same time, it was kind of like, well, Rocky's a fight is a boxing story. Ultimately, he's a boxer, you know, and we see that he tried to coach Tommy Gunn. He wanted to be Tommy Gunn's coach, and then that didn't work out in the end. So I imagine like this, that, you know, there was just no interest in making a Rocky VI after the numbers from Rocky V. So yeah, he did a lot. He went on to do other films. I'm just looking at his discography now. Very few titles really stick out. You know, he did probably about 20 films between Rocky V and Rocky Balboa. You know, he did
in a 16-year period.
Right? You know, he did Judge Dredd, which, you know, we're both quite keen on. That's quite a, you know, almost a cult classic, I suppose. You know, it's like that. You know, that's a
but it's almost like tongue-in-cheek comedy.
Sure, yeah, but like a lot of these other stuff, Demolition Man, I've not heard of any of these.
That's a great movie, by the way.
Is it
Demolition
good?
Man. Yeah.
Okay. Oscar.
It's got some real value to it.
Assassins. He did
No,
Spy Kids 3.
Not good.
It's like, God. So I think he was probably in this point in the early 2000s. He was probably thinking back a lot to Rocky V and was like, we can do better. You know, we can you know, and it's also like he's probably thinking, well, I'm older. I'm now maturing now. I'm sort of entering my old man period of life. And it's like, well, what would Rocky be like now? So this is kind of
the autumn years have started to come in.
you know, the salt and pepper hair and stuff. Like this is very much.
Why did you say that whilst you're looking at me like that?
I didn't look at you. I looked away from the camera deliberately. But like, it's almost like I think of this film a lot like I think about like Godfather 3. It's kind of like this is an opportunity. This is a chance.
True.
This is a chance to
So
be
true.
like to sort of jump ahead into the future and be like, where are we now? How have things changed? What's the same? And
I think it's the perfect analogy of it being the the Godfather 3 of the Rocky series.
yes, I think so.
You know, the Godfather never got a really, in my eyes, it never got a Rocky 5 equivalent, which was
Because the first
terrible.
Rocky 5 films really go on straight after each other, don't they?
Yes.
I mean, the beginning of the previous film is the
immediate.
end of the last film, whereas this is a complete kind of fresh slate. It's like a lot of the characters are gone that we love. And the world physically looks different now. We're in the 21st century, and it's like, well, where does Rocky fit in the 21st century? Has he been forgotten?
Yes.
Is he a bit of a dinosaur? I mean, some people think he's a dinosaur. He got nicknamed Rocky Balboasaurus or something, you know. So, like, that's that interesting sort of like, yeah, what is it like now when way post, not just like as the boxer's leaving, what's it like when he's now just, you know, in the history books, you know, when
Sure.
I think at this point, Tyson, you know, Mike Tyson has gone into boxing, had a career, gone to jail, went back to boxing, and retired again in the span
in
between
this kind of period. Yeah,
in this
definitely.
period of films. So, yeah,
It's got a real, it's interesting. It's a bit like Rocky is almost the American story, which is, you know, and anything that's happening
rags to riches,
rags to riches to rags
underdog,
again, which is very very much America. It's got a real vibe to it that I think there's a reason why some of these movies have been added into the Congress library for film, because they're so important to American culture, and Rocky 1 especially is, and I think a lot of these Rocky movies are, even though they're not necessarily, you know, groundbreaking piece of cinematic art, they're still really very very important. We always ask you every episode to try and give us a haiku, a Japanese poem that sums up what is going to be happening in this movie before we start to break it down properly. Have you got a haiku for us this week?
I do. Past life calls again. One more time, get up again. The beast is gone.
I like it. It's really nice to sort of think about how we talk about this a lot in the podcast, about how athletes struggle with the idea of moving on from who they were, and maybe establishing a new identity of, you know, who they are moving forwards.
And to be honest, his new identity is still kind of just playing on his old one, isn't it? You think we see him in his restaurant, and the way that restaurant survives essentially is his ability to tell stories. It's kind of like the restaurant is really a scrapbook of his life. It's named after his wife, and it's got pictures of all his fights. It's got his belts, and he's, as the restaurant manager, he's telling stories of people are there to get.
He's the host, isn't he? He's almost like,
yeah, you know, he's like, how you doing? You know, whatever. Like, you know, it's they're selling probably pretty average Italian food, you know, but people are there because it's Rocky's restaurant. You know, it's.
Oh, we would go.
Yes,
100%.
I wouldn't go there because the food's great.
You go there because you wanted to have a glass of red wine and listen to Rocky tell you the story about how he got punched in the face by Apollo.
Exactly.
Then you'd be like,
you know,
tell us what really happened in that fight where after Rocky in Rocky 3 where you had a secret fight with him. You know,
yeah,
what happened
in
really?
that secret fight? Exactly. You know,
did he beat you and then you didn't want anybody to know, so that you were happy to not throw the towel in Rocky 4, which got him killed, and then he was
Jesus
silenced
Christ.
forever.
Yeah. Like, well, Apollo had it coming. It's like, yeah.
He was going to out me that he could beat me again. I thought about that, and I thought, no, it's over.
Yeah.
No, okay, fair enough. I love your haiku. It's brilliant. Before we get into our 3-act breakdown, I want to start off with our quiz this week. And I want to ask you a question. It's more of a trivia question, or more of a philosophical question.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, how likely is an over-the-hill ex-world champion to win a title fight in his mid-40s? We've seen it with, like...
How long did Mayweather go on for? Because he must have been in his 40s.
Yeah, but he wasn't over the hill, was he? He was still a champion.
Oh, over the hill? Title
so
fight?
It's a guy who's coming back. Yeah, so it's a bit like Tyson coming back and fighting Jake Paul, or something along those kinds of lines. Do you think that's going to ever happen? Do you think that's the reality of somebody winning those fights is possible?
I doubt they're ever going to be the favourite. But as Duke says, there's always a chance or something, right? If
there's punches, everybody gets a punch. A punch has always got a puncher's chance. Yeah,
you're always a punch away, right? Yeah.
Well, let me just tell you about a quick story, James.
Okay.
About 1994.
Okay.
When ex-world champion was offered a title fight again by a young, unbeaten world heavyweight boxing champion, and George Foreman beat then unbeaten world heavyweight boxing champion.
Who? As in, was it for a title fight or was it an exhibition?
It was a title fight.
Jesus.
So on the 5th of November 1994, he fought a guy called Michael Moorer, who was the WBA and IBF heavyweight title holder. George Foreman was 45 years, 299 days old. It was at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in 1994. And in the 10th round, out of 12, he knocked him out.
Knockout is crazy as well. Wow.
To win those two world heavyweight titles.
Didn't Foreman fight Ali?
Yes, he did. Yeah.
What the fuck?
He fought Ali.
That's black and white television.
He fought Ali in the Rumble in the Jungle and lost.
Yeah.
In the I think it was mid-70s. I'm just going to look for when that date was.
My dad was at primary school.
It was 1974. It was 20 years earlier than the world title fight.
My God. That's
so
incredible.
20-year difference. So I know that this sometimes seems a bit silly. The whole point of this question really was, we might be saying, it's silly that Rocky gets a fight against a world champion when he's this much older. But the reality is, anything can happen, and it has happened in boxing, and that's why we can get into these kind of situations.
So before you skeptics thinking, this is a stupid film, this would never happen. Well, it did happen. So this film isn't as unrealistic as we think.
And we all know that, professional sports is never rigged, James. So there's no potential chance. There's no potential chance that it was all rigged and, just done for the money. We never, But yeah, go and watch that. If you've got a few minutes, go onto YouTube, find Michael Moorer versus George Foreman in 1994 and have a watch of it. It is wild that he knocks him out. I think even, at the point where he wins, George Foreman's a bit aghast that he's now the world champion again.
So, now I've got to defend it or what? No.
Yeah, and he did. He defended it 3 times.
What?
Successfully.
He kept going. No, you're joking.
Yeah. No.
Oh my God. Oh my goodness.
Okay, let's talk about. Let's break down this movie. Let's talk about the sort of the 3 acts of Rocky Balboa, and we're going to start off with the struggle and return. And in the opening act, we meet a retired Rocky Balboa, now in his 50s, living a quiet life in Philadelphia. He runs a modest Italian restaurant in honor of his late wife Adrian, who passed away several years ago. His son Robert is an adult and quite distant from him. Burdened by the shadow of his father's past fame, Rocky struggles with loneliness and the weight of his own history.
Despite his age and the passing of time, Rocky's competitive spirit is reignited when he watches a televised match between the current heavyweight champion Mason "The Line" Dixon and a lesser-known fighter. A computer-generated simulation predicts that Rocky, in his prime, could beat Dixon, sparking public interest in the idea of a real-life match between the two boxers. After some encouragement from his trainer, who is now Paulie, and others in his life, Rocky decides to return to the ring for one last time.
Okay. I mean, my dad died in his 50s. And I'm only now 10 years off of my 50s, and 9.5 years off of my 50s, which is crazy. I would not be encouraging any man in their 50s to be getting in the ring against a world title, a world champion, to try and continue to fight stuff. What I will say is, I love the first hour of this movie. The first maybe hour, even hour and 20 minutes of this movie.
It's fresh. It's fresh exposition, right? It's kind of like, we know the characters, but like it's now so far in the future, it almost feels completely fresh. But then we're seeing old characters that we love who are completely different. Spider Rico, Lil Marie, Paulie's back. It's like, we know
Paulie's. I mean, let's just talk about Burt Young really quickly. Burt Young playing Paulie for the 6th time in his 6th movie. He's incredible in this.
He's good.
The pain that man is feeling, the sort of disappointment of his own life. There's that moment where Rocky goes and they drive back to the now pulled down ice rink where him and Adrian had their first date.
Yeah.
And Paulie sort of lays it out for him. He says, you like coming back and remembering all these things because you loved her. He says, I don't want to remember any of it because I was terrible to her. I was horrible.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of true. I think when you get to that sort of age, you realise that it's hard to see all of the good things that have happened in your life sometimes because you start remembering only the bad things that you've done. Remember only the poor decisions that you've made and how difficult it's been.
Yeah.
Just on Burt Young, a couple of things. Burt died in 2023, so we've lost Burt Young now.
Oh, right.
And obviously he was in a bunch of movies. But something you probably didn't know is that Burt Young was a boxer.
What?
In his life before he became an actor, he was a boxer.
Amazing.
He boxed in the US Marines and apparently posted a record of 32-2-0 with 26 knockouts, and then went on to be a professional boxer with a 17-0 record, but fought under some different aliases. He claims that Customato, who trained Mike Tyson, and Floyd Patterson was also his manager. He was in all 6 Rocky movies up until this point, and also starred in Chinatown with Jack Nicholson, The Sopranos, which you might not quite remember that he was in The Sopranos.
When was he in The Sopranos?
He's Bobby Bacala's dad, the one who does the murder, where he's coughing a lot.
His dad.
And he's like smoking and coughing.
I need to go back to that. He couldn't have been in it for very long. Must have been like an episode or two.
Couple of episodes. They ask him to do. He's referred to as Old Man Bacala, who does a job. He does a couple of
hits,
murders. Yeah, he does a couple of hits. And he was also in Sergio Leone's last ever film, Once Upon a Time in America. Which,
cool.
Is one of my absolute favourites and was made the year that I was born. So, shout out to Burt Young and much love for playing this character who, in the first movies he's kind of despicable. In a lot of the movies he's kind of a despicable character.
Well, he's sort of I think he always just shows like what a typical disgruntled sort of bottom of the barrel Philadelphian is. He really is what Rocky would have ended up being if it wasn't for boxing, right?
100%.
That's why I see of him, yeah. And it shows that's what Rocky's trying to not be. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of sad. Something that we don't necessarily consider is that he's always Rocky's friend.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout the movie, he's always there for him. And when we talk about Rocky's personal life in particular, he's lost so much at this point. Adrian's passed away of ovarian cancer. He's his connection to his life, Rocky's past life, is just his son who doesn't really want to spend time with him, and Paulie, his friend. I don't know if you can ever say Rocky's got any best friends, but apart from maybe Apollo, once they've become friends. But Paulie's this guy who introduced him to his wife, all these kinds of things. Without Paulie, we don't necessarily have a Rocky.
No, you're right. Yeah. And that's kind of like, and that's not like a hidden thing really either. That's kind of self-evident in the film based on like, whilst Paulie's basically Rocky's best friend, he's always feeling he's always a bit envious of Rocky. He feels like Rocky's not grateful and Rocky hasn't like returned the favor back to Paulie enough. Even though that we know that like Rocky's always willing to help Paulie, he just needs to ask. Mm-hmm. But like Paulie sort of expects him to get all these sort of rewards for his loyalty without having to ask. So they're constantly sort of like good guy friends do. They always seem to able to have quite intense conflict, and then they usually resolve it pretty quickly as well.
Yes.
So, and it's not, and it's like not just purely because of because remember they were friends before Adrian, right?
Yes.
It just happened to be that Adrian was his son, so his sister. So, yeah, Paulie kind of gave Rocky's blessing, like, okay, if you like this girl, and like I know you well enough, Rocky, you're a decent guy. Just don't mess her around, like that was kind of how they started, wasn't it? Yeah. So, but he's not really any different here. He's still at the meat factory to begin with. He's
But yeah, Paulie's come full circle at this point, hasn't he? He's gone from working in the meat factory to not working in the meat factory to going and working for the sort of the gangster in the first couple of movies to go and do the collection job, and he's ended up back at the meat factory, just not able to escape his life in Philadelphia. And he has one of the most powerful lines, I think, in this movie, where he says, when you said before, you spend enough time around a place and you start becoming the place. And isn't that so true for these two, that they are Philadelphia? It's the city of brotherly love, and whilst they aren't necessarily blood, they are brothers-in-law, and that's really evident.
Their fates are pretty intertwined. They're kind of stuck. They're kind of joined at the hip. What happens to the other one? What happens to one sort of affects the other, especially when things happen to Rocky.
Absolutely, 100%. Really nice sort of crafting of the story here, and bringing in character from the first Rocky movie, and I think she was in a couple of the others, of Lil Marie.
Yeah,
the girl that Rocky bumps into on the streets in Rocky 1.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's grown up. She's working at the bar that Rocky sometimes frequents. She's got a kid, that's in the movie, and Rocky interacts with, and Rocky's maybe sort of saving from the streets a little bit potentially,
getting a job and stuff. Yep.
And she provides that reality of that Adrian wasn't the only person that's ever believed in Rocky. Rocky's natural goodness shines through all the time, and that everybody's sort of rooting for Rocky because he's a good guy. And she sort of questions that in the movie in a couple of scenes where she's like, "Why are you doing this for us? Why are you helping us?" And he's just like, "Well, doesn't cost anything to be nice, right?"
Mm-hmm. And it's
I think that's really special.
Yeah. And like it's intense because like he didn't recognize her at first, and then but then obviously remembered. And I was thinking of what's the purpose of Marie in this story, and really it's just a sort of like it's a haul back to kind of, I guess, kind of like Rocky's ultimate purpose, which is to be that community figure. He's always been that kind of guardian angel to make sure people are on the right path. He's never wanted people, he's never encouraged people to stray from a honest life.
Mm-hmm.
All he ever wanted from boxing was to sort of prove to himself what he can do, and then also to then give the people he loved the things that he never had.
Yeah, you say that so well. That's completely true.
And it's like Lil Marie was just a side character in the first Rocky film.
Mm-hmm.
being like, what did he say? What did she say to him in the first film? Like, screw you, creepo, or something.
Yes.
Screw you, creepo. But and so like, yeah, why not have a guy? Why not have someone who's grown up when with Rocky being present or not present, a really kind of someone who's Rocky was a big part of her life. Both when he would sort of make sure she got home safe, but also like that whole community backed Rocky.
Yes.
Everyone felt like everyone was inspired by Rocky when he was boxing, because he was always the underdog story. People always took strength from the fact, well, if Rocky can do it, then maybe I can do it. And it's sort of, but you also see that the sort of decline in this community kind of ties in with Rocky's absence from boxing. And it's like, well, look, now the people are losing their jobs at the meat factory. It's like now the ice rinks closed down. Lil Marie's having to work, she's not living in a great flat. She's, kind of just about getting by. The buses don't run through the neighborhood anymore. It's sort of like, it's not just Rocky who's kind of been forgotten in part. He's sort of just a shadow. The community is sort of kind of declining as well. So like,
absolutely,
I feel like indirectly Rocky's return to boxing is sort of reignites the community to an extent, right?
Yeah, that is the thing that I think we've got to highlight here, is that we always talk about community being important. Everybody talks about community being important, and I think we're getting the vibes now that the world is having less and less community, and Rocky is almost the embodiment of community. In where he is, and yeah, you're absolutely right.
I think he's become the standard about how athletes should be in their community. Like, I think the Philadelphia Eagles try and do that to an extent. They try and take on the spirit of their city, and they try and have like a feedback effect where they can hope, kind of motivate the city itself, and I mean, like, in Jason Kelce, when they won the Super Bowl in 2018, Jason, I'm pretty sure, used the line, "It's not how hard you get hit, it's not how hard you hit, it's about how hard you get here and keep moving forward." I'm pretty sure he used that in like the parade speech afterwards.
Yeah,
they really cling on to that sort of image, that kind of
100%.
Ego.
I'd love to ask this question, because that's interesting that we've talked about an athlete being in the embodiment of a city, and Rocky really is the embodiment of Philadelphia. They go hand in hand. Can you think of any other city that has the embodiment of an athlete?
Or, an athlete that embodies a city, like where they're from?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think there are a couple of Italian American athletes, but like, they don't really be New York. They're just sort of, they just put like the Italian Stallion or the Italian whatever in front of their name to kind of like give them something that's unique to them. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't think so.
I was wondering whether or not we've got anything like that maybe in the UK.
Because to be honest, I feel like
because you're almost like the king of that city, aren't you?
I mean,
Rocky
there's
is the king of
there's the Gypsy King, right? Mike Tyson Fury's the Gypsy King.
He's from Manchester,
right? Yeah,
I don't know how
he's not not like the athlete of Manchester. Yeah, you're right. Because he's a solo athlete. It's like, because sometimes.
And the other thing is that something to say is, Rocky's not even a real person. He's a character. He's a character from a TV show where they're like, yeah, that character's from this place. I still don't know if there's any other character that is so synonymous with a city. Yeah, definitely. I wonder if we'll have to do some research and see whether or not there's any other people who embody the place that they are from, or the place embodies them.
Yeah, and we'll put this out to the audience. If you could think of any other names of athletes who sort of embody the place they're from, write to us. Let us know at championsofcinema@gmail.com. We'd like to hear your thoughts.
That's great. Okay. Interestingly, so we do get Stallone's son being portrayed again in this movie, but not by Sage Stallone, who was the last person to play him in Rocky V. Sage Stallone would have been available to make this movie, but he was actually directing his first movie of his own directorial career.
Oh, cool.
At this point, it didn't go well, James, and
Oh.
Sage Stallone sadly passed away on the 13th of July 2012, so age 36.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Fuck. Jesus.
Yeah, so it's kind of sad.
What did he? How did he pass away?
It says here that he died of coronary artery disease caused by atherosclerosis. So apparently not a drugs situation, but still, you know, he's 36 years old. It's a young age to be dying. You know, the guy's only 8 years older than me. You know, so it's a bit of a weird one. But there you go. That's sad, very really. The long and short of it, you wonder whether or not maybe that relationship with him and his own father wasn't necessarily the strongest at that point. Which again, maybe Stallone cast a bit of a big shadow over his own son.
Yeah,
never mind the character.
Could have done. Sure, he would have helped him as much as possible in terms of getting him contacts, connections to try and start his chosen career. If you know, and especially if, and that's a lot easier to do if Sage really wanted to get into the movie industry, then I'm sure Sylvester. I would like to think Sylvester would have helped him as much as he can.
You'd hope so, but his Wikipedia page isn't very big, so a bit of a shame there. But I think that the actor who plays him in this, his son in this, is pretty good. I think he does a very good job of explaining sort of the challenges that he has, and you know, this is the second movie in a row where we've had Rocky has problems with the distance between him and his own child, and you know, has to come back from that again. Yeah. Which kind of feels a little bit like, God, this person is a yo-yo in Rocky's life, coming in and out of it all the time. And maybe that's how it feels when you've got an older child. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a weird one. And there's those really powerful sort of speeches in that first sort of scene, those first scenes. We're going to talk about best lines in a little bit, but this one's got some powerful stuff going on between father and son, and the conversations that they have about, you know, that you know, living in somebody else's shadow is difficult, you know, all those kinds of things, which we talked a little bit about before the start of recording today. And I thought it was something that maybe doesn't get covered as much in any other movie that I've ever seen, but this one really starts to hit it very well, right?
Yeah, I mean, because like it's interesting because it's like, well, in this film, Rocky does love his son a lot. He's always trying to connect to him, like, hey, let's meet up for a coffee, a drink, whatever. Like, he's always trying to connect to him. And actually, like, his son doesn't avoid his father. He's so like, you know, his son's like happy to see him. It's just that he's busy you can see that he's busy trying to build his own life, his own career, his own personality. But often at no fault of Rocky's still kind of affecting him, because it's like people are constantly asking him about his dad. You know, he's sort of been put into good positions because of his dad. Like, oh, you're Rocky's kid. Yeah, that's helped him. He has this sort of imposter syndrome where he feels like things only happen because of him, not because of me. And it's like the issue that his son has when Rocky then wants to get back into fighting, that this puts more attention on Rocky, which then puts ultimately more attention on his son. And it's just kind of like, if you love me, don't do this, because this is like, I can't take it. Like, I'm already having issues, and this is just making it worse.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I think you're completely right in that assessment of the relationship. Okay, let's talk about Act 2.
Yeah, Act 2, the training and personal challenges. Rocky begins training in earnest, focusing on regaining his physical strength and stamina despite the obvious toll time has taken on him. The rigorous workouts are grueling, but they reignite his passion for boxing. As he prepares for the fight, Rocky is faced with emotional struggles, including his fractured relationship with his son, who is angry that Rocky's return to the sport is only drawing negative attention to their lives.
While Rocky fights to reconnect with his son and regain his respect, he also deals with self-doubt in his capabilities. However, he pushes forward, fueled by the desire to prove to himself that he still has what it takes to compete at the highest level. The media and fans are skeptical, dismissing the idea of an old, out-of-shape Rocky taking on the champion, but Rocky's determination grows stronger. I just want to talk really quickly about Bill Conti and how important Bill Conti is in this movie, James.
Mm-hmm.
We've moved away from Rocky V with its terrible soundtrack, and we've moved back into what makes Rocky fantastic. We've got a montage where I'm really wondering whether or not a boxer needs to squat 220 kg to be a good athlete. But also we get some Bill Conti score and music to that montage, which I think
nothing new, right?
This movie
any new songs? No,
I don't think they're particularly new, or they might be reworks of the old music.
Yeah, revisited.
But they're still absolutely incredible. And it's the music, really, I think, that makes the Rocky movies special. Is the Bill Conti music, the orchestral music that we see throughout those first couple of movies, first 3 movies, and sort of having a resurgence here, which I think is really special.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think they're really great. And like we got the lovely Adrian themes back, and we've even got some of like, I think Eye of the Tiger's here.
I don't know if there is. I can't remember if there was Eye of the Tiger.
Can't remember if there's Eye of the Tiger, but we know there's definitely a song from Rocky 3, as we kind of hummed at the start, the Take It Back by Stallone's brother, which I thought was had that kind of old feel back, that kind of classical feel back, or the classic Rocky feel back. Sorry, yeah, that's right, Frank Stallone. It was good, and what I like is that this kind of fits into that. It's really like we see like Rocky and his son get reconnected here, and what I've just at the time of recording now, I've sort of realized is that when Adrian was alive, particularly in the first 4 films, not so much in Rocky V, the turning point for Rocky always came through Adrian. You know, it's always been Adrian giving him that extra emotional assurance when Rocky's in that grueling process of training. It's when Adrian comforts him that we see Rocky's sort of like the next montage, the kind of like, gonna fly now period.
Yes.
Obviously, with no Adrian here, that role is then empty. However, I think what happens is that his son takes on this role.
I think you're right. Yeah,
because we see when he goes to see Rocky at the cemetery, because Rocky's trying to get some confidence. He's almost visiting Adrian. Like, look, I need some energy here.
Yes, we
see that his son comes after quitting his job, and giving Rocky that sort of confidence. Like, I'm with you, Dad. Like, I wasn't before. I know what I said, but like, if this is what you feel is right, I'm with you 100%. And that's when we get Rocky has his armor now. He has his family. He has the love from his family, which we saw made him so strong in the first films. He's got that again, and that leads to his sort of rise and progression and the lead up to this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. You're completely correct. I think, I didn't necessarily think about that when I was watching it, that the son was taking that role. And it's almost interesting because the headstone for Adrian is almost like having the character there. Because Rocky goes and visits her, he talks to her, but she can't talk back. A little bit of movie magic for you. That grave is real. It's still there in Philadelphia. And It says Adrian Balboa on it. It's a real headstone that they had placed in that graveyard, and it's still there apparently. She still has an actual grave in Philadelphia.
Interesting. As the actress, because she's still alive, right?
Yeah, Talia Shire is still alive.
I wonder if she ever visits it and things like.
I don't know if you'd want to.
She must have seen it at some point, or I don't know. I mean,
but then saying that for a little while, in a city that's very near us and very close to where you practice for your American football team, at Wollerton Hall in Nottingham, there was Batman's grave for a little bit. You could actually visit Batman's grave and have a bit of a cry at it. Like,
is that where where the Christopher Nolan Wayne Manor is?
for Batman for the third Batman.
The third
films,
one, because I think
Yeah.
the first one was in Wales, wasn't it?
I don't know, but
I think
yeah,
the
they
first
used,
Wayne Manors were in Wales. Interesting. So those
but
graves
yeah,
are still
there
there.
was
Wow.
that grave is still there, so you can match up shots from the movie when he's when
I failed
Alfred's
you.
sort of crying at the.
I failed you. Yeah.
I found you, Mister Bruce.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bury another Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I think.
Cool.
I think sometimes having these little things is really good. Having watched so many of these movies already, my back of my brain is saying, "Oh, I wonder if me and James could have a little Northeast America road trip holiday at some point where we drive through Philadelphia.
Soprano sites, Philadelphia, and then we do
Yes.
Rocky sites.
Yes.
Yeah.
We go
that'd be
to
cool.
where they shot some of maybe Remember the Titans. Once we've covered that, and
Raging
some, you know,
Bulls in New York.
yeah, exactly. All those kind of places where we could
There's a
go and
lot.
do some nice
There's a lot.
shots, and going out and doing maybe getting a couple of photos outside of Mighty Mix Gym would be pretty cool.
Amazing that. Yeah.
So that would be quite a cool thing to do. But maybe that's something we can look at in the future. The presentation here sort of changes a little bit with Rocky Balboa, where we get some shooting that's really different. So I'm not going to get into the fight straight away, but there's this almost this blending of sports television being brought into the movie, which we've never seen in any of the other Rockies up until this point. We've seen stuff where it's at press conferences, but it's not being shown as the actual, ripped off production of the actual TV show. Does that make sense?
Right. Okay.
So we've got that style coming through that makes it almost feel like we're watching some sort of like docu-film. It's like, here's some actual real footage of them having the conversation about Rocky on the TV, and I'm like, it sort of throws me a little bit. I will say that.
I think it's kind of a reflection of like the 21st century style of sort of sports journalism, which is less newspaper headlines and now a lot more of those kind of like First Take, ESPN kind of chat shows of people debating online about who's got who's like the, these are how narratives are formed, and it's quite interesting to show like the impact that these narratives have in the community and how like the rumors spread, even if the athlete doesn't watch it, it gets to the athlete one way or another eventually.
It does, yeah.
Which is quite interesting.
100%. Yeah. Okay. We get a couple of interesting characters. You said that you quite like the agents in our preamble for the show.
I did a lot because we had Duke. I always want to make sure I say his surname because there's two Dukes in Rocky, which is always confusing. The second Duke from Rocky 5.
Yes.
What's his surname?
Oh, the second Duke from Rocky 5 is oh my lord,
with the fur coat.
Yeah,
we'll call him Agent Duke. The guy
Washington Duke, George Washington Duke.
Washington Duke.
Not Tony. Tony. Yeah.
Yeah. So Washington Duke, which we see in Rocky 5, who's sort of was representing the sort of commercial aspect of modern sports agenting. I don't know. And now that's sort of continued on, and it's actually kind of grown now. Now he's often multiple people surrounding us as a single boxer, and it's whilst Dixon is sort of training, he's being pitched these sort of potential ideas, about how not just like why he, the benefits of this boxer, of this fight from like a money point of view it's that long-term strategy of like, well, if we do this fight, then we can get a series of fights afterwards. This will repair your image. We donate some of the money to charity. Don't mess up Rocky too much, because they're kind of assuming that Dixon's going to win. It's like, okay, don't mess him too much. Be sort of how would you say it? Be modest in your fighting. Don't destroy a legend.
It's
don't
big business.
Yeah,
it's big business fighting, isn't it? Yeah.
It's sort of like big picture stuff. I thought it was really interesting. And when they meet Rocky, they're kind of saying it as it is. They're not. I don't feel like those agents, when they go to Rocky's restaurant and they're pitching him the idea, I don't think they're necessarily being slimy either. I think they just sort of say, "Hey, look, this is good for both of us." maybe not saying why it's good for Dixon, but like they're not trying to scam Rocky or anything.
No, not at all.
So
it's very different, actually, almost to the Rocky One. The juxtaposition of those two styles of characters, the promoters. You know, they're important to the world of boxing.
Promoting was the word I meant, not agenting. Yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah. But how they're different. You know, the first guy, the guy who sort of stood there with his suit on, and he's talking about, you know, this is going to be a great spectacle for your career to Apollo. Yeah. And it's almost how those interactions have changed.
It's kind of sort of showing how
it's almost in every single one of the box in the Rocky movies, which is really interesting.
It almost feels like at this point there have been so in history, as sports has grown so much post-war, to become a professional spectacle. It's almost like you can't fool athletes as much anymore because there are so many bad stories of guys getting ripped off, not just in sports but in music as well. Think about promoters and managers ripping guys off. You can't really do that anymore. So now you just have to sort of be almost like a business proposal. You have to be kind of as transparent as possible, laying out all the details, as well as having to do the additional sort of coloring in of the pitch to be like, not the immediate benefits, but also the long-term benefits. You kind of have to add that in. It has to be a mutual gain. You can't just purely you can't fleece guys really anymore. So I thought that was good. I thought that was kind of that.
Although apparently it does still happen.
Real. Sure,
it does still happen. People do get fleeced. I think Eddie Hall did I think he did a boxing match or he did an MMA fight, and he went back to the people, and he was supposed to be getting a lot of money. Then he went back to the people to say, okay, yeah, so where's my money? Where's my check? And they were like, what are you on about? What money? And he didn't get any of it. It was like he missed out on
crazy
a huge, 6-7 figure sums,
crazy
of money just disappearing. So it still does happen. And that's why having, ironclad contracts and all those kinds of things is still really important.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's talk about Act 3 and the fight and redemption. The climactic fight between Rocky and Dixon take place at a packed arena in Las Vegas. The match is brutal, with Rocky enduring heavy punishment from the younger, faster champion. Despite being clearly overmatched, Rocky's unrelenting heart and resilience help him in the fight. He absorbs blows, pushes through the pain, and fights back with every ounce of his strength. Though the fight ends with Dixon winning by a split decision, the crowd and the boxing world respect Rocky for his sheer willpower, determination, and the heart he displayed throughout the match.
Afterwards, Rocky's relationship and his son is mended, and he finds a sense of peace knowing that his journey was about much more than winning. It was about proving to himself that he could still rise, face his past, and fight on his own terms. The film closes with Rocky leaving the arena, walking off into the future, not as a defeated fighter, but as a man who has found redemption.
I really like that. Yeah, it's so true.
Mm-hmm. It was so well done, that, almost like in Rocky 1, how like in the background you're hearing about how the other guy won, but actually the goal wasn't to win the fight as much as it was just to show that you can still do it. That you can still do it, which is kind of great.
You can go the distance, yeah.
And actually, he won the crowd's favor. And, at the same time, I think at this point, you kind of like Dixon. Because, like, okay, like, people sort of accused him as not being a gritty fighter. He can't take hits and stuff. And he kind of got respect from it. He won on split decision in an exhibition match. So it's not like he won a phone. You can always say, like, oh, well, it was an exhibition match. He wasn't trying his hardest, So I don't think it's going to stain his career that much, really. No. So it's like, both guys kind of win, as was kind of the purpose of it. And ultimately, Rocky gets his catharsis. He gets his sort of, as he says to Paulie, like, the beast is gone. He can rest now.
Yeah, I think those lines were really important to me. And we talked about that before we recorded today, that there's that scene where Rocky's in the meat plant and he's talking to Paulie, and he says that there's this beast still inside him that makes him, sort of kind of like it's choking him or whatever you want to call it.
He struggles to breathe sometimes. You know, it's
Yes.
just like there's that kind of just sense of like something's missing because you know he kind of remember he was medically retired, right?
Yes, in 5, and I
He
was going to
medically
bring that up
retired in
actually.
5.
Like,
yeah,
he was supposed to have brain damage, and the reality is that what they've said now is no, he just was undergoing a really serious concussion at the time.
yeah.
And
Because
that's
remember
why
he
he's
got
able to come back and fight.
because he got medically cleared, didn't he? You know,
Yes.
he did everything the right way. He went through the boxing board. He got his license back. Yeah, I think that's so. It's like as far fetched maybe as this seems, and like, well, they probably thought, well, I want Rocky to get back into the ring somehow. This is probably the best way they could have gone about it. You know.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it leaves a satisfying end. And it's like, yeah, I feel like this is kind of like a full circle for Rocky, and it's like now you can feel like he's going to be all right now. I think
Yeah.
things will be okay now until we see him next 10 years after this. I think Creed, the first Creed film was in 2016 now. So
okay,
I think
you know more than I do. I haven't done my
think-
research
I
at all on Creed yet. No, that's fine. Yeah, I think you're right. I thought it was something that was massively powerful. So there's a couple of things that happen in this final fight that are quite interesting. We get flashbacks during the fight. We get some black and white usage where the blood's red, but everything else is black and white. So it's trying to be artistic here, and it's doing some interesting things. Did you notice that in the flashbacks for this, there was never any Apollo?
Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, I don't know why.
Do you know why?
Oh, why?
Because MGM hadn't paid royalties to Carl Weathers for the years coming up before this, and so he was like, "No, you're not going to have any. You're not allowed to use any imagery of me."
That's a
and
shame.
I'm going to be sore about it, which means that it didn't appear at all, which is a real shame. It would, because I think, imagine if we'd be able to have maybe Carl Weathers, the ghost of Carl Weathers, come back and being like, Rocky, you were always the biggest. You know, like how he did in 5. We had Mickey coming back and talking to him.
Mm-hmm.
Apollo talking to him would have been so powerful. Oh, it was sort of kind of missed a trick there, unfortunately. But yeah, it's good. That shooting of the final fight is done differently because we get the broadcast style, which is like looks like it's a pay-per-view.
Then
we get some mixture of we get the mixture of the cinematic style in there as well. And because it's in Vegas, it's got a really different feel to the Philadelphia Spectrum of Rocky 1.
Yeah.
Which I really like the Philadelphia Spectrum because it makes it feel like it's in Philly. I don't feel like Rocky fighting anywhere but Philly, apart from Russia. Feels right. I don't think it ever feels right that he's fighting anywhere else that isn't Philly. But that's part of the story, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess he's not the main. I guess he's not the main actor anymore. You know, he's. You know, we feel like he's always the main character because it's a Rocky film, but ultimately this is more to. It feels like it's almost more to address the fact. Well, the simulation says that Dixon would have lost to.
Yes.
Got flattened by Rocky, so it's kind of like Dixon's the undisputed champion at this point in time. He's kind of the big name now.
Yeah,
you wonder like. Rocky's still a big fixture in Philadelphia, and boxing experts love Rocky. You see Max Kellerman say like, "Oh, I can't believe it! I watched Rocky fight as a kid, and now I get to commentate one of his fights. This is insane."
A question I want to ask is, it's a theoretical one. If the fight's in Philly, does it go a different way?
Wow,
home crowd, extra bit of energy.
Who knows? Maybe, yeah. It would have been cool to have another, like, "Hey, father, can I get another blessing?" Like whatever.
No, we don't get father anymore.
No,
he's in Rocky 5. He's one of the casualties of Rocky 5 at the end, where he gets his moment where he's just like blessing Rocky from on the shoulders of people whilst he's fighting in the street. No, that was it. It was done. No more Catholicism for us. Thank you very much. You've got a question here on your notes, and it is, how does this fit into the Rocky saga? Yeah. I think this brings the Rocky saga to almost its perfect ending.
Yeah, I think so too.
We know that we're going to get 2 more films of Rocky, but this was the point where I think Rocky was, Stallone was putting this to bed, and he does it really well.
Yeah. Credit to him. I think if you wanted to give this film a score, it's probably not a champion, just because the other, just comparing it to the other Rocky films. You know, I thought Rocky 1 and Rocky 4 are so like, they're just mega, and they hit all the right things. Everything they tried to achieve, they did so well. Maybe the thing with this film is like the concept is a hard sell to an extent. I know we talked about how George Foreman came back, and obviously Mike Tyson's come back, but like,
sure,
you know, it's with, you know, like you mentioned, there's things that weren't added because of the economics of movie making. You know, no Apollo. Yeah, and also maybe like I would have preferred a better boxer than Dixon.
I think that is a bit of the one point where it's maybe let down a little bit is I think the final fight isn't shot particularly well. I don't think it doesn't wow me. It doesn't meet anything.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, we've done so much good work up until that point about the feeling, the emotion, the grieving, all this stuff, but it falls down there 100%. And also Stallone just looks so physically different in himself. You know, Rocky 1, he's got a bit of chub to him. He's a little bit out of shape. He's not perfect. Rocky 2, he's starting to improve that shape.
Yeah.
Rocky 3, he's, you know, incredibly ripped. Rocky 4, it's a new level of stupidness.
Yeah.
Rocky 5, I don't think he even gets his shirt off in Rocky 5 at all.
Yeah.
And by this point, he's become like old man steroid Rocky.
Yeah, it looks ropey. You know.
Yeah. Well, he's say ropey. He's got, you know, he's still got, you know, his big veins and very veiny kind of stuff.
His skin looks loose. You know, it's kind of like
it's kind of strange, really, and it doesn't. It's difficult.
Yeah. So, I'd still give this film a contender. I think
I will actually. Yeah. I think if we'd had a final fight that was shot correctly and had the right vibes and had the right feeling, it would have worked really well. I know that there was some things that affected the shooting of the final fight in this. Tarver knocked out Stallone in the actual fighting, which you wouldn't expect a boxer to not be able to make it work right. But apparently they traded some real blows during the shooting of the movie. I do think you're right. I think if you'd had maybe a character that was a bit more... I don't understand. Sorry.
If compared to the other like boxing villains, the opponents like Apollo, Clubber Lang, Ivan Drago.
Don't mention any from 5 because they're not. They're all bullshit.
Exactly. So that he's more like the one from 5, like other than the ones from the first 4. A bit of a no.
And why is that? Because all of the ones from 5, and the ones from this are all actual boxers. Use an actor.
Yeah.
Use a very talented actor.
Create a new character with new motivations and sort of...
Yeah. Well, that's because what they did was, in some of the lead up to this, they used Antonio Tarver's real boxing matches as footage for the movie.
Right.
So, you know, that they just sort of cheaped out a little bit on it.
But like, it had me full. I wasn't convinced by Dixon as a boxer, to be honest. No.
I think
I don't know.
You could have had an actor at that time.
Maybe that was the state of mid 2000s heavyweight boxing. Maybe it was just a bit like,
maybe.
I don't know any names.
Well, you could have got somebody in. You could have got a decent, you know, if you wanted to be a black actor. Can you imagine a Jamie Foxx being in this at this point? And being a good character or somebody along those kinds of lines? I think you could have got something really good out of somebody. And that's just where it falls from being potential champion to a middling contender.
Jamie Foxx could have been like a Mike Tyson role. I think he's even you know,
he's playing Mike Tyson, Mike Tyson.
Yeah, he can do that sort of lift, that kind of like thing. Rocky, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you. You got nothing on me. I'm the champion. Like, you're an old bum. I've got, you know. And of course, Mike Tyson was in this film. Actually, as
he
well,
was in this film
as a little, little cameo.
There's a cameo. Lots of cameos. They want all the cameos in this movie. It's really important, clearly, to Stallone. Okay, I've got a couple of things that I want us to go through just before we get this one wrapped up. So we've got our rating. Is this popcorn fun or an art house beauty?
I think it's kind of art. I think it's art. Yeah, I really think so. Like, I think
Everything
like,
before the fight, in Vegas, art.
yeah, it's like
Philadelphia,
it's
art.
crazy that a sixth film. By this point, usually the number 6 in a film like franchise is just for cash grab. But I think he really wanted to make
It's like restitutions. This is restitutions for Rocky 5.
his restitution. Yeah, like yeah.
You got pay me my restitution.
Rocky 5 embarrassed me on national cinema. I want my restitution. Yeah.
Call back to the very first HBO Hard Knocks. I think you're right. I think it's a swing back to art, even though Stallone is the director and the writer, which isn't usual. The lighting and the design for the first hour is excellent. There's a few like really beautiful moments, like where he puts the light bulb in outside the house and gets blinded by it. Apparently, the reaction that he gave then was a real reaction. He wasn't expecting the
Sweet
the bulb to hit him as hard.
Love it.
So Stallone was like, "Whoa, quite good." Memorabilia lane. Which things would you like to take away from this movie?
So what have we done so far from the first five films? We've done
okay. From the first 5, I don't think we had anything from Rocky 1.
Let's say hat.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Rocky 2, we wanted Rocky's black and yellow ring attire because it's amazing. Yeah. The Trans Am, the tiger jacket, the Rocky Win t-shirt.
Sure.
Rocky 3, we didn't have one again. But Rocky 4, we had Paulie's robot and Rocky's sheepskin bomber jacket.
Where were the Apollo's shorts?
That would have been maybe
3.
Rocky 3, yeah, maybe Rocky 3. Rocky 5,
the little necklace,
the boxing glove cufflink, necklace. And I've got 2 for me in memorabilia.
Maybe the restaurant sign for Adrian's.
Oh, I like that.
Nice
Mine
one.
is also a thing from Adrian's, but it's the big painting at the back of the restaurant. The one of him and Apollo fighting, the one that's like red and yellow and beautiful. And I would also quite comfortably take Rocky's black and yellow ring robe from this movie.
Yeah.
I like him going back to the black and yellow. I don't want him, I think maybe, do you think, has Tommy Gunn stolen the Apollo shorts at this point? Run off into the distance?
Oh, I hate to think of that. I mean, I was just thinking, like, if I was like a collector, if I had them, touch wood, who knows if what happens later in life. But if I have the money to start collecting things, I think of all these Rocky films so far, it's still the number one thing would be if I could get like Rocky 4's trunks framed, signed. That would be sick, I think. Perhaps it's like maybe one of the most iconic sports movie items. You see the shorts, you just think Rocky 4.
Yeah, sports movie.
Even though they were seen, even though they were in every film, it's the fact that Rocky 4 was America versus Russia. So it's just like you think Stars and Stripes, Rocky 4.
Yes.
That's what was in my head until watching these again. Like, oh, actually, I know these are the shorts are pretty like symbolic in all of them. Because remember, in Rocky 1, it's like Apollo's always trying to be kind of like the Uncle Sam, kind of like, I want you. He's always like, do you know what I mean? Like the George Washington, like throwing the things. He's always... That symbolism's always throughout it as like the American story, and then
they're not in Rocky 2.
Not in Rocky. Does he not wear them again in Rocky 2? What does Apollo wear?
No, he wears white. He wears white shorts with a red red stripe.
So if anything, okay, fair enough.
Best lines for this this one.
It's the speech.
Do you think is it the speech to his son, or is it the speech to the people at the boxing commission? Because I think they're both good speeches.
They're both good speeches, but like just in terms of like how well...
me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. It ain't about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. It's about how much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
Yeah. I don't remember much about... I remember like the speech, but I can't remember anything much from the commission speech.
Oh, I've got that one here. So that one's, because if you're going to go through all the battling you got to go through to get where you want to get, who's got the right to stop you? That one. I quite like that one as well.
That's kind of like
actually conflated the two into each other.
It's a bit of an American dream thing, isn't it? About how like, look, if you're in good health, then no one should be able to be in control of your own destiny. You know,
And nobody can take your guns.
Okay. Thanks for watching. Let's. Oh God.
As Charlton Heston would say, "From my cold dead hands."
hand. Yeah.
Exactly.
Damn.
No, I think you're right. I think there is an element of that with Rocky. We've said this before. Rocky is the American story. It's almost the embodiment of the American story within reason, and that's why it's so important to American cinema, which is quite good. Just going back to best lines, I really like Tony Duke Burton saying, so what we're going to be calling on is good old-fashioned blunt force trauma.
Sick.
Horsepower, heavy duty, cast iron, pile-driving punches that will have him hurt so much they'll rattle his ancestors. Every time you hit him with a shot, it's got to feel like he tried kissing the express train, yeah? Let's build some hurting bombs.
And you know what? I haven't talked about that, but maybe that is the moment where I feel like I could take this film seriously, because it was an actual strategy that was conscious of Rocky's limitations at this point.
You haven't got speed anymore.
You haven't got speed. Your knees are gone. Like, we can't. You know, it's just got to be just brute force. It's just got to be all, that's all we've got. So cool. You know, yeah, I like that. That's good.
I'm a really big fan of it. I think I loved him coming back. I loved the reintroduction of that character again.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a super important character. I love him being in the movie. He would be. I know sometimes it's like, I think we're going to talk about it in the last episode of this series about people
glue
we'd really
guy
want to
award.
meet, like with people that we'd really like to meet from the movie. If we could go to a, I know that most of them are dead now, but if we could go to a Comic-Con and they're all sat there, who would you get to sign a picture for you? Absolutely, you'd want to like meet Stallone and shake his hand and say thank you so much for all of these amazing movies, sir. For me, I'd really want to meet the Tony Burton character.
Yeah,
of Duke Evers.
It
really
felt so
important.
natural. It felt like this guy really was like a boxing ring guy. You know, like it was just like, it was so convincing. It was so real. It was like, there wasn't, everything he said was just pure function and kind of like good management. You know, it's kind of like, this is, you know, I loved it. You know, it's like, always felt like he was the better ring guy. You know, felt like
that's the speech I'm going to give you when you hit sort of like 28 and you're playing in your last season of American football, and we're like, you know,
there's a lot more. There was a lot of.
I
thought Duke was a lot of the carrot, and Mickey was a lot of the stick in terms of.
That's a great way of putting those two
in terms of their
characters.
coaching styles. Like, they were both effective, but I felt like I loved Duke's one and always being really specific to the fight, whatever the fight it was always tailor made to wherever they were at that time.
He's the ultimate technical strategist.
Mm-hmm.
He's the guy who gets it. You know, he doesn't need to give Rocky heart. Mickey's given Rocky heart. He needs to just get Rocky going. He needs to get him moving and doing what he's doing. Last line for me that I really liked was Rocky Jr.'s telling Rocky that he cast a big shadow. It's something that I'm going to take away from this movie, and something that I want to maybe make sure that I don't do in my own life, is cast too much of a big shadow around some of my family and maybe my son. It's something that I want to try and avoid, is him feeling like he's ever going to exist in my shadow. You know, he's got to cast his own.
A father is always the one person in life who wants their son to be bigger than them, right? The only man in your life. That line
is a good line, but I don't think that line is true.
You don't think so? You don't think that your father's the only man in your life who wants more from you? Wants you to have more than them?
Your coach wants it to.
You think so? Oh, of course, yeah.
The best coaches do. I want you to.
It's not that the father thing's untrue. It's just not exclusive to the father. Is what you mean?
Yeah, I think people have said it's exclusive, and I think it's a very nice line that somebody either
sounds good,
as a
right?
poem, or it sounds really good. It's very true. It sounds
superlative sell, don't they? Yeah.
But I think teachers and coaches also fall into that world, that they do truly want you to achieve more than them. If you said to me, you know, if I had if I had a record at Loughborough as a position, you know, whatever it would have been, I wanted all of you to beat my records. I wanted all of you. I had a perfect, I had a close to perfect season, but I never had an unbeaten season. I wanted you to beat those records for me.
I guess the only difference is like that maybe, I'm not saying about you, but in general with coaches, it's kind of like having successful players makes coaches look good. And it's kind of like,
True.
Whereas parents don't choose their kids, really. It's kind of
but having successful children
it's an
still makes you look
unconditional
good, doesn't
love,
it?
isn't it? But yeah.
No, but yeah, it still makes you look good. And just wait until you've got kids, dude, when you start realizing that there's a lot of people who go through this life living vicariously through their own children and pushing children to fulfill their dreams.
That's true as well.
It's very sad.
Yeah. I've seen
Very
that.
true.
Where yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I'm so glad that that you got to watch it, because I think it sort of saved the franchise a little bit so far. We get to move on now to these three movies, which I'm really excited for, because I've never properly watched them. I think I've watched watch Creed 1. I haven't seen Creed 2 or Creed 3. I think I've probably got a little bit of a man crush on Michael B. Jordan. I think he's, he's a good looking guy.
He's kind of just like, he's just a good dude. Like, he never really comes on the, he's I don't think I've ever heard bad things about him. He seems like he's a humble guy. I think
he's actually coming out with a movie in the next few weeks that I really want to go and see, called Sinners.
Okay.
About vampires in the 1920s in like Southern America.
Yeah, I think I've seen that. Which
looks like it's going to be an absolute winner.
Good guy. He always does things the right way, and I think he worked really hard in Creed, and I think he even in the Creed 3, I think he might have even directed potentially or co-directed.
I think maybe
he really wanted to do that film justice. He wanted to do it the right way, I think.
I wonder whether or not I'm going to tell you some things in the next couple of weeks that might make you change your opinion on him a little bit.
That's what you're for, right? You're to
bring you down.
Bring me down. When I'm...
Every time I try to enjoy myself, he pulls me back
down.
We've had a great one this episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Champions of Cinema. Thank you so much for sticking with us through Series 3. I appreciate that going back to back with Rocky films might not be for everybody, but for us, this is one. I think this is helping us reach new depths and new heights of our understanding of a sports movie franchise. It's getting us to new areas when it comes to our understanding and
we knew how good Rocky was, and that before that this was one of the films that when we had our discussions about this back in like July about this podcast, like this film was like the first one to come up. I think this might have even been the first film I ever wrote notes about in my own time. Just like let me I know Rocky's good, but let me like try and figure out why I think it's a good film. And I think covering it in this format now is really cemented how important these films are and why they really are as a whole. As one story, really is like a champion of cinema, not just of sports cinema. It's one of the great American stories that's ever been told in cinema, and its cultural impact can't be understated.
If you are looking to follow us, if you're looking to find out more information about us, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at
Champions of Cinema.
Wonderful. And if you're looking to get in touch with us, if you want to tell us how great or how terrible this podcast is, you can get in touch with us by emailing to
championsofcinema@gmail.com.
Fantastic. James, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, let's get on with what could be some really fun follow-up movies.
Cool. Look forward to it.
Me too. Thank you, James. Speak to you soon.
Thank you, Joe. Take care. Bye, everyone.